So, did we establish at our last meeting that we don't need to officially enter into executive session because we are, so we can just jump right in? Okay, great. So welcome back. It's been a while. I've missed you all. So I'm glad to see everyone. You all look great. So I just want to say a little bit about what our goals for this meeting are. So remember, we had a meeting with the direct reports, and between that meeting and since, I've been working through some revisions to the text with them. And at that meeting, we talked about having input from the department heads, but you all wanted to give them a version of the charter that was revised based on the input from the direct reports. So the version that I sent you, whatever day I sent it to you, is the version that has the changes suggested based on the meeting, but also the items that we didn't get to during the meeting. And so the plan is for us to go through that text today, make as many revisions as we need to and can. And then later this week, I'm going to be meeting with the department heads to get their feedback on that. And I will then create a version that includes the input from the department heads, and we will have a meeting with the direct reports next Thursday. So that's a lot of activity in a short time, but that's why we're meeting virtually, so that we can get this moving more quickly. All right, questions about that? Okay, so anyone have a question, or are we good to go? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. As you saw in the agenda, I identified the issues that have the most substantive changes. And so we're going to start with those. And if we get through those, then we'll get to the second set of issues. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive in. Okay, that's the right one. All right, can everyone see that? Mm-hmm. All right. Now I can't see all of you when I'm sharing my screen. I wonder if I do this, if I can.
Right now, we could just see number 2, starting at number 2.
Right. Okay. So what I wanted to do was start here. Is this big enough for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to just need you to either do the hand raise function or just shout out, because I only have small boxes, but I don't have of all of you. Okay. So this one, I think this is a simple one. To add at the end of number 1 to follow the supervisory chain of accountability. Anybody have questions or concerns about that?
No.
Okay, we're good. Okay, so I'm gonna literally just set that. Okay. Here's where some significant change happened. I'm not sure. Yeah, let me read it out. This was revising. Originally, it said that commissioners couldn't have any questions about investigations. And the general counsel said the way we had it drafted was too extreme and not appropriate. So I hope you all had a chance to look at this. I'll read it out and then open the floor for discussion. Commissioners separate their prosecutorial functions from their administrative functions to preserve their ability to decide or adjudicate a matter fairly and objectively. As such, commissioners may request from leadership information on an investigation, including circumstances leading to the investigation, current status, and an estimated timeline for completing the investigation, but will make no attempt to influence any pending or ongoing investigation or obtain any actual or perceived special treatment for a specific applicant or licensee. So that gives you more opportunity to learn about investigations than the way we had it drafted before. But it makes very clear what the ethical constraints are.
One of the questions that I raised here is, you know, when someone dies and there is an honest attempt on the part of the investigative team to preserve our our adjudicative function, I for one, and this is where I think we might be at cross purposes here by drafting this too stringently, is that I think we should be knowledgeable about that. And this is one that I've wrestled with, and I don't know how the other commissioners feel about this. But for instance, where does one go if there may be a legitimate complaint about a particular investigation? Do we just bring it to the executive director? How do we handle something like that? Because I know that all of us have gotten complaints about the pace or the objectivity of particular investigations. So I'd just like to raise that with others. How do they feel about that? How do they feel about whether or not we get notification when someone dies or some potentially, embarrassing story about a, cultivator running away with I'm just trying to sort of suss out what other people are thinking on that. There's nobody else thinking about that.
Others have thoughts about that? Commissioner Roy?
So number 9 allows us to ask for some level of detail on an investigation. So in other words, in the past, it's like, oh, we can't talk to you about this, they're under investigation. But I'm reading number 9 that it gives commissioners some authority or ability to procure some information around an investigation. Am I reading that accurately?
Sean, could you sort of lay out how you think this is going to work?
I think Commissioner Roy just diagnosed it. That's exactly what it allows. Is I believe you're entitled to information. So this would provide you that information. As Madam Chair, for your first question, I feel like we've addressed this elsewhere in the document several times over. Yet we continue to revisit a specific example of a tragedy, but it feels like that tragedy is becoming our governance conversation now. And it's, I don't know, I'm frustrated by that because it's one specific data point that is now sprinkled throughout this entire document. So,
okay, then I'll withdraw.
Well, okay, Sean. Thank you, Sean. Can we just add, like the way it reads now, we may request, but we're not. Can we put and are entitled to from leadership information? Because this just reads we request it, but we don't necessarily have to get an answer back if you just read it at face value. But if we say commissioners may request from leadership, may request and are entitled to from leadership information, I think it buttons it up a little more. And maybe I'm being cynical or overcautious, or I don't know what you want to call it, but this is we request it doesn't necessarily say we would get an answer. So
can I just add to when we say leadership, and Sean, I always say this, you are the executive director and we're writing this document for the future. But whose responsibility is it to tell us any of these situations? Investigations, is it general counsel's, is it yours? Who's the information, who's the messenger with this stuff? Because then I think about, all of us, any commissioner sort of going to leadership to get information here, to get information there. And then we play telephone with the information. So within this, who do we mean by leadership, if that makes sense as well.
So I just want to add that leadership is defined earlier in the document as
Okay.
the executive director, the executive director's direct reports, and department heads.
Okay.
So we define that up in the roles and responsibilities, and then, so that's who that term leadership is pointing to.
Okay.
If that helps.
Yeah, so just in a very practical example, if myself and Commissioner O'Brien have a conversation, have a regular check-in with General Counsel, and she tells us, hey, there's something brewing right now, and, you know, Just Incredibles left his location and left information in there. There's an investigation happening. And only her and I are privy to that information. The other commissioners have not yet had conversations with General Counsel, so they don't know that information. Like, is that okay? Like, we're okay with that process? I just want to make sure that this is very clear, because I think to Sean's point, you know, this is, you know, this has been a situation, as one situation, which is Lorna's situation, but, you know, like the Lorna situation, we have a whole bunch of other situations without having a person involved. So I just want to be clear on what we're saying in this one.
And if I can, and again, Sean, this is right because of the conversation, you know, that I had just this week. You know, the comms team basically said that it is not their job to tell the commissioners when something like this. So for instance, to make you more comfortable, Sean, we'll take Lorna off the table, but we'll put, you know, Just Incredible, okay? And different people knowing different information. But this is the thing, one of us gets a call, do you know, okay? The press team knows, the investigative team knows, the general counsel knows, we don't know. And then all of a sudden, just like in the press conference or the scrum where, you know, Commissioner Stebbins and I had to say, we didn't know anything about it. And then we get, you know, then we look stupid. So it's really at what point, you know, from my perspective, and this is, you know, as much the sort of managing the information, so none of us is embarrassed in the event of a tragedy or crime or whatever it is, that if the press team knows it, they know it because it is potentially an outside story. So I think that it is incumbent upon the communications team that if they know about something like that, that they may, and again, I don't know what that standard is, but I was told specifically, no, we don't tell you, that's investigation's job. Investigation doesn't like to tell a lot. And so I think we just need to clarify what that is, because I don't want to find myself in front of another scrum looking embarrassed like that.
So let me jump in here, because we're talking about a few different things at once, but I just want to point to, in the executive director roles and responsibilities, we had added alerts commissioners of urgent public health, safety, and welfare incidents in a timely manner. So that is the executive director letting you know that. Does that satisfy the question? Does that answer the question of who's going to inform the commissioners?
I don't know if it's
Public health, safety, and welfare incidents in a timely manner.
I guess that those are good, but I would tell you what my threshold will be, is that if it goes to the comms team, it's because it is a potential external story. So I believe that the tipping point should be, if indeed it is a potential external story, that we should be at least made aware of it. We don't need to know the details, but I think we should be made aware that something could be brewing. And I don't know how to define that.
I mean,
Sean, yeah. I was just going to say, Sean, do you have a thought about that?
Yeah, I don't think it's the comms team that has the responsibility to tell commissioners. I think it's either me or Yao would be the two, because these are all licensee matters. And I was under the impression, in fact, I recall talking to commissioners about the specific just incredible matter as back in December when we learned about it. So I don't think anyone was necessarily caught flat-footed or by surprise. Perhaps it's the evolution of the matter itself. But
It's my understanding it was known, at least in certain parts of the team, as early as October or November. Maybe you didn't know about it, but
no, I found out about it when I returned from vacation and told everybody then. So and I think actually commissioners were alerted while I was away.
Yeah,
So-
Sean, I think we were using Just Incredibles as an example. At least I used it as an example. I don't know if other people did not know about Just Incredibles, but I think we were briefed on it. But back to like Sean, your point about who this is just my opinion. I think that these situations, whether, you know, tragedy, big story, investigation, I think Shannon, to your point, something that may be a story, I think needs to come from you, the executive director. And I think you've been, you know, I think, listen, let's be honest here. Besides the Lorna situation, you've made calls for every situation after 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, and or, you know, on check-ins, right? So I think, you know, the Lorna unfortunately was an outlier in this situation, a big outlier, but it was but I think like besides that, you've been the person informing all of us. So I think that it stays with you, the executive director role, and I think the CIE's role, and you all have to have a conversation. Let's say, Sean, you're not around, or there's 5 of us, you got things to do, and you delegate to the CIA and say, hey, can you make the phone call, or can you reach out to the 5 commissioners and let them know that this is brewing right now, this could be a potential story, blah, 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 right? If you delegate that authority to the CIE, then you delegate that authority. But I think, at the end of the day, the executive director is the administrative manager of this agency. And at the end of the day, it stops and starts with you with this role. So I think it stays with the ED and, leadership, how we've defined it. As long as we're clear and understand, to Commissioner Roy's point, the logistics of it.
Susan?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I think what you meant, Executive Director Collins, I don't think she meant the comms would tell us. I think it was when comms is notified, we should be notified, not comms telling us. So when comms gets the information, all of whatever they get, we should get the same time they get it. I think that's the point. And for Just Incredible, I didn't know all the plants were missing till I read about it in the paper. So I didn't get briefed 100% because I read about all the plants missed. Nobody told me in this agency all the plants were missing till I read about it in the paper. So that's just an example.
No, that's just simply not true. I'm looking at an email from December 14th that informs commissioners of everything.
All the plants? All the
plants aren't missing.
What?
All the plants aren't missing.
So that was wrong in the paper that all the plants are missing.
Didn't come from us as a source.
All right, I
Link to the property
want
owner,
to
Just
pull this
Incredible
back in.
But I'm sorry, but I'm getting provoked here. So we're using very specific examples and we're falsely stating things. So
Okay.
if we're gonna use specific examples, let's
my
use them.
apologies. That's what I read in the paper, that all the plants were missing. So my apologies, but the point is, when comms is notified, at the time they're notified, we should, as commissioners, be notified, the timing issue of it.
December 14th, an email to every commissioner notifying you of everything that we knew.
All right, so I just want to, what I hear that there's agreement is that there should be notification and it should come from the executive director. And when we get to the executive director roles, we can add something about investigations. I want to bring us back.
Can I just have Sean, can I just, I hope we don't sort of go through this whole day with the defensive posture. There have been concrete examples here, and if you take a defensive posture, it's not going to help us kind of walk through this right now. And I know that, Lorna has triggers us. It embarrassed us. And so, so those are just 2 examples, but it is why, I have been saying, how do we get to know this? I've raised this question. And so I think that answering it and understanding it, it's not that you need to get defensive. It's not that you need to backtrack and show who knew what. It's just let's establish and let's have an agreement on when commissioners are notified so that we don't get embarrassed or potentially get embarrassed. That's really all that we're asking for. So I think we need to sort of take it down. Don't worry about the specific examples. Don't look backwards, but we're using these examples to say why we think it's necessary.
I think
But
there's.
we're
agreement,
inaccurately
so
using
I-
the examples, though. You've known
Okay,
for 2
I'm
months
gonna-
and we're pretending like we don't know.
Hang on, all right, I'm gonna really try and keep some order here. I think there's agreement that commissioners will be informed by the executive director. There may be some disagreement about whether commissioners have been in the past. But going forward, and perhaps as it has been in the past, it's going to be that commissioners are informed by the executive director. So I think we can move on from that. Commissioner Stebbins, did you have a last comment on that issue?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna appreciate the conversation we've been having about number 9. I have a number of issues with it, or at least the way it's worded.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, starting with, we don't really have a prosecutorial function. We have an adjudicatory function.
Okay.
You know, so kind of wordsmithing that a little bit. And I have several concerns about the next section, which I can jump down to. So you know, if we get an inquiry, we get a request, we have somebody, again, go back to suggesting that sometimes all of us are and the executive director, we're all complaint box A. Somebody who's simply reaching out to figure out where their license application might be, which I'm assuming is somewhat the information that we're looking for. I'm okay with that. You know, again, I think we need to separate kind of simple requests that might come into our inbox versus what might be the other scenario, which I think we're trying to address through direct notification by the executive director or chief chiefy. So we may request leadership information on an investigation, circumstances leading the investigation, current status, and an estimated time for completing the investigation. I'm fine with all that. It's the second part that makes me a little bit nervous, and then kind of the scenario that we're not addressing here, which is, what does the commissioner do with that information? If the commissioner's being asked to check on a timeline or being asked to check on an investigation, I have a concern about what we do with the information when we have it, but also will make no attempt to influence any pending or ongoing investigation or obtain any actual or perceived special treatment. I have a question as to who's the judge of that.
Right.
Is that me? Is that a fellow commissioner? Is that staff? You know, how is anybody reading our request, our questions? Just don't want to create any kind of tension where it doesn't need to exist.
I wonder if we should table this and speak about it at the next meeting where we'll have the general counsel and chief of investigations there, rather than us spinning our wheels. This is language from the general counsel. And so maybe it's best if we have this conversation with them in the room. Does that make sense?
It does, but you know, in listening to Commissioner Stebbins, you know, one of the issues that we constantly, Sean gets this, we all get this, is why have I waited 10 months? Why have I waited a year? And the investigative team does not provide adequate information, and it becomes adversarial. And, you know, in some instances, you know, people are concerned about the objectivity, you know, once someone complains about an investigation. And I don't think that we need to get defensive about this. I think we need to be thinking about the information that is coming back to a number of the commissioners about the pace of investigation, about the concern about getting information so that people don't go out of business, fire people, whatever. We know that this is an issue. We know that this is why Senator Moore filed his bill. So I think one thing is influencing an investigation, saying, I want you to do this because so-and-so. I want you to make a decision that is not on par with what the law or regulation is. But the timing of an investigation, and this is something that, I leave it to Sean, but I get worried that someone makes a phone call, okay? And this is what I've been feeling. Taken 10 months, where, how, why? Is that influencing an investigation? I don't know. But time is one thing, influence is another, I think. So I think maybe we table it. And I don't know if other commissioners have the same thoughts that I do, or, have found themselves in that position.
Susan, I think I just want to say that I think your idea, obviously, of having the general counsel and CIE in the conversation, I think will be helpful for us, because the reality is that we're all having separate conversations with them. And then, Sean's our traffic cop. So I think having them and us really hearing from Yao and understanding the process and understanding how they think, and what their norm is, I think will allow us, because the reality is that we got so much shit going on amongst ourselves that sometimes we're not even allowing ourselves to see like the actual operations of all of this stuff. So I think it would be really good. And I think you have to prep them and have a conversation with them before they walk in here, because this stuff is detrimental to all of us. Everyone's frustrated right now, so I think we need to figure this out, but I think we need to kind of bring down the temperature to really understand everybody's perspective, especially operationally, because we are getting those calls. We are getting, we do understand sometimes, well, why is this here? Why is this there? But I'm not working on the CIE team at all. So I don't understand their process. So I think it would be really good to have them, and for you to be able to mediate that conversation amongst all of us, I think will be very helpful.
Okay, I'm going to highlight that for the Thursday meeting. So let's move on. I appreciate that. Okay, I think we'll do better with everyone in the room, and I will do what I can to sort of seed that conversation as you suggested.
Thank you.
Should we do this? What are your thoughts about C here? Is that does that work, or should we just leave this whole paragraph, this whole section?
I think it's important still to have in there.
Okay. All right. We'll just do the whole section with them then. How about 10? Commissioners will inform the appropriate department heads as needed of invitations to participate in conferences and visit businesses and legislatures.
I mean, it looks good. It's what we're doing now for the most part.
But this was one question that I have, in terms of, the mess, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we still manage the sort of messaging of what is commission policy, what is commission position. I still think, and maybe we get to another part in here where we address that. But again, is this to the department heads, or is this through the executive director? And I don't know how Sean feels about this.
Chair, can you just clarify really quickly? Are you talking about number 10 specifically, and you're talking about like invites? Like, what do you mean?
If it's invites, if it's inbound, I think that's different. I think that if someone asks someone to participate, when we're talking about this, who deems who the appropriate department head is?
Yeah, I got this one kind of confuses me, to be honest.
I think this needs to be in consultation with the executive director.
Well, I'm thinking, for instance, if you're invited to attend a conference and you're inclined to attend. I don't know why you need to. I mean, I guess for instance, if there's a cost to travel, then the department head would probably be some form of finance, right? So But there's a procedure for that. Follow the procedure and we're good. Visit businesses, I think it's addressed earlier as far as a heads up to, I think it's investigations or Yao's team structurally. And legislatures it just reads kind of funny to me a little bit. So I don't know if it implies the mass legislature, if it's another jurisdiction, or so again, that just kind of reads funny to me. But there's a lot in this and it puts a burden on commissioners that I want to be very careful about. That's all.
Do we need this sentence? Is this necessary?
I personally think it's helpful guidance. Again, not thinking of just the 5 of us that are reading it now, but somebody new when they come in. I mean, if you break out these invitations, it's really between communications and investigations and enforcement. So I think we can narrow it down to those 2.
I would add finance. I would add finance in there if it's travel related.
But what approval do we need and who do we seek if going to have a meeting with the chair Ways and Means? Chair Ways and Means said, hey, I'd like to catch up with you, as he said, on cannabis issues. So do I need to call somebody to get permission to do that?
Nope. I would argue no. I think I would be grateful for a heads up to Matt. And obviously if you were so inclined and you needed support from Matt or Ernesto, but that's the extent.
But that's what I'm saying is this implying either staff support or monetary support? That's what I'm saying is I'm trying to sort of figure out what's the point here. Do we know where this came from or?
I think this is part of a code of conduct, and it's part of making sure, for example, if you said you were going to a certain business, if there's an existing investigation, then the investigation team might say to you, not a good idea for you to go to this.
But have we dealt with that? Have we dealt with that elsewhere? Because throwing in the legislatures in there is a little bit confusing, because I never, every time I go and talk to a business, I generally say, I contact Sean. I don't contact I've never contacted anybody in
the piece about the legislatures is further down, so it's a bit repetitive here. So if everyone's okay with that, I think we can take it out, because they're in the legislative outreach section. It refers specifically to legislatures.
And I think the business one is covered by 9B, although we just highlighted that for further discussion, but 9B would seem to cover that.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I think Commissioner Stebbins, to your point, the conference piece might include or could or probably should include some effort for communications as far as, will it be marketed? Do you need preparation as far as PowerPoint, speech, etc.?
Yeah, I recent example, I got an invite to go to some event in Worcester, and there was an idea of having coffee with a commissioner and things like that, and I wanted to run it by communications to kind of run down some of the details, and after they did, I didn't think it was appropriate to go.
So I guess my question is, do we need this in the charter, or is it something that you do because you want information?
Could you restate that, Susan? I'm not sure if I.
So I'm just using Commissioner Stebbins' example, right? He had a question about whether it was a good idea to go to this conference, so he contacted communications staff. Should it be kind of on an as needed, or here it looks like it's for every potential conference? I mean, we've said that the legislature and the businesses are already taken care of in prior things, so it's really comes down to conferences.
To me, that should go to the executive director and not department heads. That's what I'm saying. So I think that and Sean, I don't know if you agree with me, but I don't know what department head has the authority to say, yeah, you can go to Vegas. I think that's you.
And we have a process that I think Kate manages for most of you as far as making sure that things get submitted in a timely way. So,
I
but they come to me, to your point, they come to me.
Okay. So I'm gonna just switch that out then.
Are you comfortable with that, Sean? Because I think that,
Can we say, can we say executive director and or appropriate department heads? I mean, you know, we keep talking also about all the stuff that Sean has on his plate, and it's like, this is like, you know, Chair, when you ask like where this comes from, is kind of like, it's sort of like a common courtesy of, there's so much, we're all doing so much. That I think this kind of came out of like us notifying Matt if we're going to the State House, notifying press if we're going to be at an event and there's a reporter there, you know, to Commissioner Stebbins' point, if we said yes to an event and we want some support. But I think I'll give you guys a really small example, but somebody invited me to speak at a event in Holyoke in April, like a sort of like what Commissioner Stebbins and Roy did, like a pitch competition. And they asked me to go speak. I said, sure. They've been inviting me for a year. I said, I'll go. And then I just sent it I CC'd Kate and I CC'd Tara and I said, hey, can you guys look at this, have them fill out the appropriate request form and paperwork so I understand who's going to be in the room. And if there's going to be any press, I want to know. So, I mean, I didn't go to Sean to ask him for permission. I didn't go to any appropriate department heads because that's like my, you know, like all of us, you know, doing roundtables with David O'Brien, you know, I think those are like stuff that we can decide. I think this came out of making sure that, you know, folks on our team know more of the high level conversations or visits that we're having. And obviously the conferences need to get approved by our appointing authorities. And then we need to make sure that the funding is allocated for our conferences internally. So that's how I kind of.
I've never heard, so our appointing authorities have to approve whether or not we go to conferences?
So for conferences outside the state, if you are not speaking, we need approval from our appointing authorities.
I did not know that.
No, only if they're paying you to go. They're paying your way.
That's a conflict of interest issue.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That's right.
All
If
right,
you're
I'm
accepting something.
I'm gonna try and move us along. I'm not hearing, I think this must be okay to inform the executive director and or department heads.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna move on. Here's number 11. Commissioners will consider and avoid communications that may give rise to undue favor or improper influence on matters, including but not limited to contracts with the commission and agreements with specific licenses.
I don't know what that. I think that's overly broad. I don't know if I understand what they're trying to get at here.
So again, this is language provided by the general counsel, and my understanding, I'm not here to defend it or interpret it, but that undue favor or improper influence are words directly from the ethics standards.
With specific licenses or licensees? What's that?
I'm wondering if that should be licensees.
Okay.
I don't know if I understand. I mean, we all have, I get we have a state code of ethics. We have an enhanced code of ethics. I don't know if I like how this is worded. I think that we need to, I would eliminate this because I think we have to live by a code of ethics. And Ava and I apparently have to abide by an additional legal code of ethics. So I get a little bit concerned about this. I don't personally like the wording. I think that we need to just go to the state ethics and our heightened ethics code. I don't know if anybody else, but in reading this, otherwise I'd rather table this just so I can sort of get my arms wrapped around it, because I'm not confident the way this is written I want to look at, the enhanced code. I want to understand what this means, because I feel this is kind of broad. And I'm not sure it's necessary if we already have a code of ethics, an enhanced code of ethics.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a reason for it.
Yeah.
I think we're governed in a few other places. And
So
anytime a contract goes out for the commission, we get a nice note from Dan Billings saying you're in a blackout period, et cetera, et cetera.
So do people want to table this for conversation with the general counsel, or do people want to delete it?
I'd prefer deleting it if people want to leave it in and wait for general counsel, but that would be my.
I agree
Others?
with the chair. I think we should delete it as well.
Yeah, delete.
All right. The executive director and general counsel will inform commissioners of any threatened or pending litigation related to the commission in accordance with the commission's standard operating procedure. Okay.
Mhm.
13, the commissioners recognize their obligations under state privacy laws. The commissioners will consult with the executive director, chief people officer, and as needed, general counsel before raising or discussing personnel issues.
Can someone explain this?
Again, language from the general counsel. So might it be better to just
And
ask?
I would wait or delete, because this is again one of the things that, it was proposed that we not have any conversations about personnel issues. And just like we get external complaints about stuff happening, we get internal complaints about stuff happening. And I know that this is a headache for Sean, and I know that this is one of Sean's biggest beefs, is people trying to latch on to, a particular commissioner who will be a protector. However, sometimes there are legitimate personnel issues that I think we have not only the responsibility, but I think the right to be able to have those conversations. And I don't know if anybody else, shares that position with me, but this is the same reaction I had. And I think Alyssa had, suggested that we are the sounding boards for a lot of people. And I think it's healthy. I've even, Sean has asked me on, at least one occasion to talk on to one, employee who was thinking about leaving, and, trying to see if I could be helpful to keep that person to stay. Couldn't get her to stay. But that was me getting involved in a personnel action. But I, did it in consult with Sean. So I want to sort of understand why it's here. I want to understand if other, commissioners have the same. I'd like other people to sort of weigh in on this, because I assume they've heard from staff about issues that, again, bubble up or raise either with the rest of the commission or with Sean.
So I just want to say that the example that you just gave falls under this. We'll consult with the executive director. So it sounds like that meets that. Just wanted to point to that, but let's hear from other people about their sense of this section.
I would welcome some more clarity on personnel actions. The chair raised an example of, it sounds like a conversation that the executive director encouraged her to have with an employee. Obviously, we know, I think, the other landscape of personnel actions, which can be much more serious and require a much more diligent approach. So I'm confused by the language.
Okay. Should we table this for the general counsel then? Commissioner Roy?
So the way this reads, the commissioners will consult with the executive director. And it sounds like you have to consult with the ED and the chief people officer. So in the instance the chair just shared, was it necessary to consult with the chief people officer, or she just worked with the ED? Like the way I read this, you have to consult with both.
Right.
Yeah, that's poorly written. Okay.
Mhm. So it might be.
I
or-
don't, yeah, I mean, Sean, I would welcome you to comments here on this one, because this is like I'm reading it and I'm also very cautious, especially when his personnel actions, what are we talking about? What's the real conversation in number 13?
Thank you.
Yeah, Camargo, I agree with you. I feel like we need to understand the context here, because otherwise you're just reiterating a part of the law. It just seems a little bit unnecessary without understanding why it's being highlighted here.
And Chair, thank you for sharing that example that you used. Obviously, I don't think anybody of I didn't know that was a thing, but I'm very sensitive. I do talk to staff. I have built relationships. Obviously, we've been here 2 years, but I'm very cautious of anything personnel, very sensitive. So I really haven't had any of those predicaments. So I just want to understand where this is really coming from.
I agree with you, Commissioner.
Let's see if we can, let's see, Sean, can you help us out? Do you know what's behind this?
I don't know what's specifically behind it, no. At the same time, I can think of scenarios that would fit in it. So I think trying to put this in a box myself. I'm reading it, whatever it's worth, as if someone comes to you with a personnel matter. So if I'm concerned about an interaction that I had, or whatever it might be, that is, you become aware of a situation involving personnel, that all of us here as leaders in this organization then have an obligation to go to HR with that, because what has happened historically or in the past, and there are examples or instances where something bubbles up or starts, a simmer becomes a boil with a personnel matter, and Erica, previously, now Justin, will talk to that employee and they might say, well, I talked to Commissioner so-and-so about it and nothing happened. But neither I wasn't aware of it, Justin wasn't aware of it, Erica wasn't aware of it. But the employee now has an expectation that I talked to someone in the leadership structure. And I think commissioners find yourselves in that structure just as I do. And so I think it might be that context, it could be that context. So I guess, and if that's the intent, I think we could maybe clarify this language a little bit further, that if you become aware of something, we all, including myself, but also commissioners, have an obligation to report that. The other thing I would say is that we should refrain, all of us, from gossip and rumor mill, and not participate in those levels of conversations, because that obviously has an effect on personnel matters as well. So those are the two scenarios I work through.
Can I sort of make a commentary about culture? Because I think, and you and I had a conversation about this, okay? And this is also something that Commissioner Camargo, I think, has been, particularly focused on, but it's building a healthy culture where we're not considered saviors. We're not considered battering rams. We're not considered, the ultimate boss. You and I said, I'd had lunch with, I'd invited a couple of people to lunch from the investigative team. Apparently they didn't clear, an hour, whatever, with their supervisor. And so they ticked off their supervisor. And then all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy because we had to do it because the chair was asking us to. The fact is, this was just, want to have lunch? Yes. 2 weeks in advance? Yes. And, I got some pushback on statements that some of the commissioners made at a meeting, talking about a website access for, whistleblowers, talking about telephone, calls, talking about, different changes to the vendor training. Just because we see it in a public context doesn't mean it's gospel, doesn't mean it has to happen tomorrow. And so I think, Sean, this is sort of part of what I think is incumbent upon you. It's sort of breaking down, I think, the barriers between the commissioners and the staff so that they understand, and maybe this is part of it, but just because a commissioner is saying it doesn't mean that people have to hop to. And that's also part of how do we work with you, work with me to make sure that the needs of the commissioners are met, but also the staff doesn't feel an undue pressure. some of that will come from this document, but a lot of this has to also come from culture and how they see us, know us, and understand how we operate. And I don't know if anybody else, has those thoughts, but if people think they need one of us for a guardian, then there's something wrong.
All right. I think that has, again, I've been here with you for about a year, and I think that's one of the goals of the document. And so part of the reason to get the document done and start the implementation so that the actions can shift. Because I think what I've heard about commissioner requests, it kind of has to go both ways, right? The commissioners have to take responsibility for making requests from staff because they may feel like they have to jump. So it kind of goes, there are a lot of people who have to take the right actions to inform a good culture. I'm gonna just highlight number 13 for further discussion with the general counsel.
Susan, can
Yes.
I also add just on this one too? I think we also need to, Justin is our our only HR, high level person, or, acting, but I think, and I know we're trying to get to the end of this document, but I think this brings up a lot of points, Chair, to your point, Sean, and everyone who's been a part of it too, but it's, we got to figure out what that boundary line is, because do we get involved in HR matters? If we happen to have a cordial conversation with someone and they share something with us, like, how does that work, right? I think we haven't talked about that as much. I've had people leave the agency and send me a little message and just say, Commissioner Camargo, it was so nice meeting you. In this instant, you said this, I appreciate that, right? And that's it. I haven't had any further conversation with people who've left the office, nor have I engaged in gossip of like, so tell me how your experience was, right? Like, I'm very sensitive to these issues. So I think it would be helpful to also understand that and what our roles are and our boundaries when, staff do reach out on something that they feel like, oh, I may need a protector or savior, or they themselves could be gossiping, and saying, hey, some people leave for all kinds of reasons. But we also, how do we use that information? What do we do with it? How do we then, are proactive? I haven't been in that situation yet, but I think I would encourage a conversation with our HR around things like that, because, I think, Sean, to your point, there is a rumor mill at this place, and there is a gossip, channel going on about all kinds of stuff. And Shannon, to your point, what sucks about, our roles and where we're at in the culture is that because of the prior, situations, the culture is so deep in this place that, people are either afraid or want to talk to us. And you said it, Shannon, you said, just because we say something at a public meeting doesn't mean that people have to jump and do it and get nervous. But the reality of it is our staff hear us say something and they're like, oh shit, now this new policy needs to be in place tomorrow. That's real. And you said they have to see us, know us, and know how we operate. And we need to know the same thing from them. And we have not had that opportunity, Shannon. It's just been, we've been building it little by little, little by little. Yesterday's regulatory meeting, I think, was amazing and fascinating because we were able to see so many of us for the first time. I'm like, there's people on the screen and I'm like, oh, who the hell's that? Let me look at the org chart, right? So, we're all here trying to figure it out, even though we're all frustrated, but I think they're all valid points. But we also, as commissioners, we also need to be accountable to our own bullshit and our own boundaries. And I think on this one, there's a lot here. And I think that bringing in HR and us having that sort of like understanding can help us, because yes, we want to hear the nonsense that is happening when it's happening so that we can work with Sean to be able to move it forward. But we also want to hear the good stuff that's happening at this agency at the same time and have our boundaries and be able to do our jobs as policy makers and regulators. So I just want to add that to this one, because I think this one has an underlying theme to it. And, Shannon, I think to your point, part of my role here the last 2 years has really been to help the agency with culture little by little. So I appreciate the comment, but I think that this is bigger, and we're working at it, but it's a bigger.
If I can actually just, this is not to do with this, because again, we're all here. One of the things that I had a conversation with commission voices, and in terms of the all staff meetings, they think that the commissioners can't be invited to that because of the open meeting law. And I'm like, no. So we need to, I know you've been pushing for that. And I know Sean, has also, mentioned an interest in that, but I do think that, getting us all together at some point in time, I think is a good idea. So we'll move on. Again, I just wanted to make that point, but I was surprised that I heard that response. They don't think we can all be in the same room with them.
All right, so it sounds like the personnel issues are bigger than something we can do without additional input. So I'm going to move us forward, but
I just
Commissioner
have
Roy,
one more
did you have
question.
one more comment?
Yeah, I do. My question is around when personnel leaves. So exit interviews, you learn a lot from them, and I'm just curious how commissioners can attain access to what information learned from exit interviews to help make this agency continue to move forward, because I don't currently think that, I don't even know if exit interviews are standard practice, number one, and number two, if they are, how can commissioners have access to what is learned in an exit interview so we can help continue to move culture in a better direction and this agency in a better direction? And I don't know if it belongs in this document, but I know I would love to have that information.
That's a good question for HR, right? I think, Commissioner Roy, good question. Who does, that's not our role to do exit interviews, I don't think. So that's good to understand from our.
Justin indicates that he's going to start doing regular exit interviews.
He does them.
All right, I'm gonna table that for now because we need to move on in the document. So we're moving to what was external communication. The proposal was to change that to press and media engagement. Much of this section changed, and I'm hoping that you all had a look at it before we got here, but I'll go through it section by section. Number one, the communications team will strategize and manage press and media engagement with the executive director and in collaboration with the commissioners. And that was a sense from the meeting that there needed to be just a general statement. Everyone okay with that?
I got a question. I'm not sure I like the idea of taking out external communications, and just seems very limiting to only reflect press and media engagement. I mean, we go out and do presentations. Commissioner Roy does it. I've done it. We've all done it. We talk to different groups. We get invited to different groups. And I certainly see the communications team as valuable in prepping me for that. We have somebody who specifically helps us work on, creating PowerPoint presentations. So, it's kind of press, media, and external engagements. I think that's all of our function and all of our responsibilities. So I hate to ask to put that back in, but I think it's important.
Everyone else agree with that?
When it says in collaboration with commissioners, I'd like that more fully vetted. I'd like to understand that, because I'm not sure what that means. And is it with all commissioners? Is it, what I mean? I mean, this is one of the things that I talked to you, Susan, about, the chair, being the spokesperson, for the commission, as the executive director is. And when it is, in collaboration with commissioners, does that usurp some of the power of the chair? And I use the word power, and again, I was, but I think that is, one of the things I'd like to understand, what is meant by this and how that actually functions. Because my concern is that this needs to be from the commissioners to the communications team, and that the communications team executes, but it needs to be, it's the communications team executes, but I want to make sure that we allow the commissioners to have their own voice and to be, able to manage their own voice. And this has just been something that, has stuck with me. I want to make sure that we're not, in any way taking the ability away for commissioners to be able to speak.
How do other people interpret in collaboration with? Or is there something stronger, a preference for different words? Or are others okay with it the way it's written and not have the same concern?
Susan, can you clarify again? We're talking about the 1 and 2.
So we're looking at number 1, the sentence number 1, and Commission Chair O'Brien has asked about the interpretation of the last phrase, in collaboration with the commissioners.
I feel like it needs to be under the direction of the executive director and the commissioners. I mean, it's rather than them telling us what to do, it should be us engaging them in how the messaging occurs. This is, I just want to make sure that we're clear about how that is determined, that it comes from the commission, not upon the commissioners. And I don't know how to phrase that. I'm not.
Mhm.
Well, Shannon, can you give us like an example? Can you give me an example just so I understand where you're coming from?
I want to make sure that when the commissioners, for instance, when the commissioners have taken a vote on an issue, that the messaging that becomes the message of the commission. And I want to make sure that it basically, once that vote is taken, that the team executes that, as opposed to the comms team determining what that messaging will be. And I don't know how to wordsmith this. Go ahead, Kim.
What if we flip the beginning of the sentence with the end of the sentence? Commissioners will strategize and manage press, or, engage with the executive director. And if you want it top down driven as opposed to bottom up driven, I don't know, is there a way we flip the sentence?
That doing that means that the commissioners are going to receive the press requests and manage those press requests.
Many times I do receive press requests, but I forward them to.
No, it's not saying that I guess I'm talking very top line press strategy and engagement. That again, it should be the comms team executing what the commission votes on and determines, as well as the executive director, as opposed to the comms team telling the commissioners what the messaging is.
So my concern, Chairwoman, is we don't vote on every press or media engagement. So I understand if it's a matter of policy, there was a discussion in the public meeting, but this seems to encompass beyond that.
No, I don't disagree. And I'm not saying that I have the right wordsmithing. I'm just trying to make sure that when there should be messaging coming from the commissioners, that the commissioners are directing it as opposed to being directed. And I don't know what the language is, and I'll, and maybe this is something that we can sort of wordsmith, but I just want to make sure that the commissioners maintain their voice, that the proper balance between what the commission is, what having a position and being able to put that out there, that it is executed on behalf of the commission as opposed to directed by the staff towards the commission. But I don't know what that language is, so I'll sort of.
I don't know.
Chair, would it be okay? What if we struck number 1 and just stuck with number 2?
Yes. I like that.
I do too.
I'm sorry, hold on, Susan. Okay, good.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure I can still read it. You can cross it out, but I just wanted to still.
Yeah. No, I just said, because I, you know, what's happening is with so many different conversations, there was a request for a general statement. So now that the general statement's there, it sounds like there's a preference to not have a general statement.
I just think that, I think the statement goes further than I'm comfortable with, and I think Bruce is absolutely right.
Okay.
I am a little bit confused. I'll be really honest, because what is the role of the communications team? Like this goes, I feel like we've sort of come back to this conversation a few times in these governance meetings. And each time we're sort of dissecting what their authority and responsibilities are and what they can and cannot do. And I guess I'm a little bit, the fear for number 1 is that we will not have control of our engagement.
I think I can summarize, because I have the same sense, Commissioner Concepcion, that we've had this conversation a few times. And I think where we've landed is, and I'm going to say 2 things, so don't jump at me when I say one of them. The first point is we always come back to the fact that the communications team are the professionals who will develop and implement the strategy. And then the concern that's been raised has been, are the commissioners giving up some of their authority to the communications team? And that's been the tension, I think, because it seems to me there's a sense that, yes, the communications team are the professionals. They're the ones who are going to develop the strategy and manage it. However, there's been a concern raised a couple of times about, have the commissioners given over their authority for messaging to the communications team? And I think that's the tension. That's the
Got it.
the line that we're trying to draw in the right way. And so what I hear from Commissioner O'Brien is that in collaboration feels like giving up too much because it's not enough. And I'm wondering if we want that, the proposal is to strike that, and that may be the thing to do. Another thing is to take out in collaboration with the executive director and the commissioners.
See if Commissioner Concepcion, I mean, what the communication team, they're supposed to develop targeted strategies, prepare for public media, prepare for public facing engagements, do the website, whatever we want to do to sort of, add that can delineate it. My concern is, on occasion, I have observed that there is a disagreement in terms of the message. Okay. And the message has to come from the commission or the commissioners. And sometimes there's the disagreement, but that's where we have to draw the line. It's I think the strategies, the execution, the management, absolutely. But the message comes from the commission. And I don't know how to say it, I don't want to sort of be backward looking, but sometimes there's a disagreement on the messaging, and ultimately it's the commissioners who own the message. That's all I'm trying to.
Just let me ask you a question. What if there's not agreement among the commissioners on the messaging?
It looks like the wording is to have the executive director play the referee, and I don't know if he wants to do that.
But that's a fair question that Susan just asked, because there will be times where we don't have consensus around the message.
And again, I will sort of go back to the statute in terms of the chair. Is that in the event that there's not a consensus, that there's not it's developing that message, with the executive director or the chair, because, again, if there's not consensus, then we need to get to consensus. And this is also one of the things that, that I hope as, chair in my role or future chairs can do a good job developing consensus or making sure that we put something to a vote so we can establish a consensus.
See, this is now I remember we've had so many conversations about this because in order to put it to a vote, that means that we're waiting on a monthly basis to have a conversation in the public about a media strategy.
I don't think we should be waiting on a monthly basis. I think we should be having, probably, and this is one of the conversations I've had with Sean, is whether or not we can add an additional meeting to allow us to talk about issues. But again,
About media engagement.
what I'm saying is day-to-day press requests coming in, they get to do that. But I'm differentiating that from the message. When there have been times where the staff conflicted with a commissioner, on a message. And so I want to make sure that the commissioner wins that argument or wins that, that it is executed. And if it needs to be brought back to the entire commission, then we do that.
So my proposal for this number one would be the communications team will strategize and manage press and media engagement under the direction of the executive director and in collaboration with the commissioners. So it just clarifies to the communications team that they are under the direction of their boss, essentially. Does that help in term, because there's a lot going on. The stories that I'm hearing are a lot of management issues and not governance issues. So
Yeah.
I think what we need to repeatedly do is make clear what the commissioner's relationship is to the staff through the executive director. So how does that fix? And I'll type it in just so you can see it. So it's under the direction of. Does that help?
Susan, and I know the back and forth that we just had, and I think,
Yeah,
Commissioner Concepcion, I appreciate what you're saying, because like I didn't know that situation, so it's also good to hear and understand the behind the scenes. But this also kind of brings up policy and process, right? So what have we done in the past? What has been the policy? What has been the process? At the end of the day, when three folks vote yes, it is a commission policy at the end of the day, whether any of us voted no on it, right? So I think, again, better understanding those policies and how that all plays out on top of whatever staff may have on their plate, it's always good to understand. So that's just from an outsider right now in this situation. The other piece of it, Chair O'Brien, I think what I'm hearing you say, and help me here, is we want to keep our independence in our messaging, right? However, we do lean on, I think Commissioner Stebbins, you've said this a lot, we lean on a lot on communications because, they have an expertise, they're professionals at this, they do it all the time. But here's the other piece of it, and you said, Susan, you're saying under the direction of the executive director in collaboration with the commissioners. I don't want to add more wording to this, but here's the reality of this, and we all know this. We can do our own media. We can have our own message, comms and the agency's not going to, appreciate this. But, again, I don't want to bring up the past, but I think why we're here is because in the past, everybody kind of has gone rogue, and the messaging gets mixed around the commission, the commissioners. And I think for us, all of us commissioners, even though we're heated right now and we're beefing beefing on issues, I think that this set of commissioners, we have really tried to play in the sandbox in terms of the work that we want to put out there and the messaging that we want to put out there. So Shannon, what I'm hearing you say is, yes, we want to work with the executive director. Yes, we want to work with comms, but yes, we also want to be independent in our message.
Can I tell you, it's not even independent, it's the primacy. It's that the message is the commission and the commissioners develop the message.
Yeah, and we gotta figure that out. And I think, Shannon, this is just my dumb opinion. I think it goes back to, understanding this stuff more, having more regular conversations. I mean, like having a communication strategy where we're all having this conversation. I joked around in the beginning, when are we going to bring Susan on full time? Right. But we never get to have those conversations, but we need to sit in a room, all of us, with communications and understand their perspective, their style. What does it mean? Give us that background. And it sucks because we do it individually, and then I'm hearing this stuff now, right? So it's like, well, I mean, I heard it a little bit, but I'm hearing it more now. So it is just so difficult. But I hear you. I hear my fellow.
My point is that the opinion.
Hang on, Kimber. Commissioner Roy's been waiting.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry.
And thank you, Commissioner Camargo and Chair. I just want a fair and equitable system. Like we voted on telehealth, all the extensions on February 8th. It was tweeted on February 9th. Next day, we voted on January 12th about the driver's ed. The first thing that came out was on January 25th about my NPR interview. 13 days later, the commission didn't tweet about the vote until 20 days later. Tell me how those two scenarios, Tell me how that is fair and equitable. 20 days later, we didn't get a tweet, got a tweet about it. 13 days later was my interview. Telehealth the next day.
Commissioner Concepcion?
Thank you. Commissioner Roy, thank you for breaking that down. I think, you know, it's good to have that example. I think, Susan, to your point, you made a point sort of about the different functions that we hold here at the agency. And I think that was valid about, you know, Sean's role or the executive director's role and the staff and their relationship underneath the executive director. I feel like what's missing here is when something like this happens, then what? Because there's some sort of, like, it just seems like there's something missing. So something did not happen the way it was supposed to. I think we can all agree on that. There was, you know, the timeliness, the prioritizing of that message was not, it just was, it was insufficient. But so now maybe that's the missing link, is how do we make sure that that's rectified and in a timely manner, or, you know, just to avoid something like that from happening. Because I do think it's important to have, whenever, I know we all get along, but when we talk about messaging and we have to take things to a vote, it prolongs a process and it gets really messy in public for things that are a little bit unnecessary. So I would like to avoid that. And it seems like the only way to avoid that is sort of remove it from that commission process. So I do agree with what Susan has outlined here, but the thing is now, what happens now? How do we avoid something like that? Because I think it's a really good example. I wasn't here for that meeting, but really getting that breakdown and understanding the timeliness of that message. I mean, we can't deny that that's not an issue. That's a problem. And I appreciate you, Kim, for raising it and giving me an example of sort of what you were thinking in this too. So that's all. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
So there's another sentence under 5. All commissioners may speak on behalf of the commission on items that have been fully vetted and approved by an affirmative vote of 3 commissioners. Something can be added there about media following affirmative votes.
Yeah, but Susan, I think this is back to my point with the HR comment. Like, we don't, I mean, and Sean, maybe this is for you and Commissioner Stebbins, you talk about this all the time. And this, we're talking about comms right now, but this is in general, the capacity of our team. Like, what are they working on? You know, how does this work? How does that where you were at right now, Susan, how does that work then with the layers of us understanding what they have on their plate? And, you know, so are you supposed to drop everything and then, you know, run to this, which is what we talked about earlier. So I think also us understanding that could be helpful.
Can I say something just before I lose the thought? Susan, yes. I like the direction you were just going in. And I think, Chairwoman, this might be something where we sort of distinguish between the 2 things. When we're talking about matters of policy that have been voted on by the commission, maybe that's a separate and a distinctive way of the way that we communicate and move forward. And maybe that's sort of where the commission then comes and engages and sort of directs the media and press engagement from the policies that are voted on. What do you, I can't see you, Chairwoman.
I can give you a quick example, Commissioner Concepcion and Commissioner Roy. I know that this was a thing because I know that, you know, I was mentioned in the process is Bruce Stebbins and I went to MMA and some stuff was, I personally tweeted or put something on my LinkedIn from us at MMA. Some pictures went up on MMA, and I know the comment was like, well, why did something from the MMA go up and something still hasn't gone up for the driver's ed stuff, right? So I think that's a really good example of a policy issue versus an event.
And technically, I think the policy issue should be prioritized over anything because you've taken a position, and maybe that's how, because at that point, the commission has acted. Maybe there needs to be a separate line here. I think that's where you're going, Susan. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes, I think what you're saying is that there's 2 lanes here. So pictures, me personally tweeting pictures.
No, I'm saying the difference is a policy vote.
On
behalf of the commission. So when we have a directive that's been voted on, the commissioners have spoken on it, this takes a different process than regular media engagement, you know.
I think we're saying the same thing. I think we're saying, yeah, we're saying the same thing. And I'm just using it as an example, Commissioner Concepcion, because I was part of the, oh, well, why does Commissioner Camargo and Commissioner Stebbins get a picture on
Can
All right, I'm gonna call a break.
I don't think that anybody, and Commissioner Camargo, I don't think that this is, you shouldn't have been able to have highlighted your participation in the MMA.
No, absolutely. I know where you're going. I get it.
But again, I think that was just the comparison that was raised because of policy. But the bottom line for me is how it executed, how it's, with all due respect, the opinion of the comms team is irrelevant. It's the opinion of the commissioners. It's the vote of the commission that I just want to make sure that we're very clear. The comms team are the experts who execute, who work with us to think about long-term messaging and how we roll out those messages, how we get, different meetings. But it's we should own the message.
And I think moving forward,
the opinions are in comms, should not be directing.
I hear you.
So give me a minute, because I've got to manage this a little bit.
Sorry, Susan.
Does it work for everyone to include under the direction of the executive director? And then I will add something. I can't do it online. Maybe during the break, I'll try and do something. Add something to 5 that differentiates the
policy
immediacy of press after a vote on something. Is everyone okay with that, Sean?
I just want to unpack a little bit the immediacy aspect of that. Knowing that there's a desire to have that fair and equitable treatment, and we're using driver's ed as the example, which I think is fine and it's appropriate given its recency. The commission voted in January of 2022 on other policy initiatives, and that letter related to that policy went out in March. So let's talk fair, let's talk equitable, but let's also keep it to what is the same bucket, which is telehealth not, legislative and executive branch outreach, which is what the driver's ed was. The most recent example would be social consumption and OUI back in January of 2022. That letter was then drafted and sent to the legislature in March. So
that's a tweet versus a letter. That's a tweet versus we're talking social media.
All right, give me a chance. Let's take a 10-minute break. I'm going to try and develop a sentence while you're on your break, and then we'll come back to this. So it's 10 to 11. We have 1 more hour. Let's take a 10-minute break, be back at 11, and see if we can't make some progress on the document on this issue.
Okay? So one was a tweet and one was a letter. Those are
okay. I got it. Thank you.
Both. They were both, to be clear.
So how many minutes do we have, Susan? 10 minutes?
10 minutes. Come back at 11. So I added a sentence. Tell me what you think of that. It says upon so commissioners may speak on behalf of the commission items that have been fully vetted and approved by an affirmative vote of 3 commissioners. On approval of an item, commissioners may direct the communications team to prioritize that item.
Mm.
So it's kind of like when you pass something, you can also say, we want this to be a priority for the comms team. And that way you can distinguish between when something passes and it's not something that needs any public attention and when it does. Does that get to, what I kept hearing is a desire for commissioners to have some control and direction of the message on new policy. Does that
give us a couple of minutes to read it?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in with a couple of questions.
Please do, Bruce.
Okay.
We've talked about, and again, not to put the executive director on the spot, but we've talked in a couple other parts of this section in coordination under the direction of the executive director. But we're kind of leaving him out here. I'm just want to make sure he's okay with that.
If that's what the commission wants, that's fine.
Okay. You know, the other thing I would encourage us to do is, and again, upon reflection of you know, the circumstance that we were just talking about, there should be some, in my mind, there should be some pre-planning, but I don't want to boil down into get too granular on the management of this. But I think when things are being teed up for a vote, you know, I know there is some work that goes into anticipating a vote, anticipating a positive vote, and that's why some information gets turned around, as we've heard, probably a little more immediately. Again, I welcome my colleagues' thought. I don't know how granular we want to get into kind of doing some pre-planning around something as opposed to just, do we need to just leave it alone as after a particular action has taken place?
Can I suggest, I think that this comes down to us operationalizing how we want to sort of work with the communications team to craft sort of short and long-term messages. And again, I don't want to do anything, you know, that undermines the ability of the comms team to execute, to plan, to, you know, connect with commissioners. But maybe this is part of what, you know, we had talked about, Bruce, you know, adding an extra meeting. You know, maybe we get to talk about communications. Maybe we get to, you know, think about how we, you know, do that, and we can do it in open session, in, you know, collaboration with our fellow commissioners. You know, that might be something that we figure out how we do, not necessarily in this document, but as a group sort of collaborating together. I don't know what you think of that, but or maybe I'm missing what you're saying.
Commissioner, Chair, can we put that on the parking lot for 1 second? Because I think what you're saying is something a little different than what I think Commissioner Stebbins was saying.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I may not have heard it.
Okay. Commissioner Stebbins, can you just repeat yourself a little bit?
Yeah, no, and again, this is where I'm trying to balance this being a governance document versus this being an operational, really granular document. And obviously, you know, we're raising examples of why we think granularity might be important in this case. You know, my suggestion on the wording that Susan had, I had an initial question of whether the executive director is okay to sit on the sidelines, even though we've mentioned him in other components of the communications governance. He seems okay with that, even though every once in a while it seems he's got to put on the referee t-shirt. I'm just wondering if we want to take this step upon approval, or is, you know, there's some opportunity for us to kind of do some pre-planning work on agenda items and to, you know, fully being prepared for if they pass, or if we're just comfortable with once a vote's taken, we're going to direct you. But I don't know how people feel about that.
Commissioner Stebbins, so what I'm hearing you say is, and I think Commissioner Concepcion and I started having this conversation, was sort of like trying to separate the policy and the vote versus, you know, quick, easy events or things that are happening, right? Like those are two different things. It sounds like we're talking about, you know, upon approval of an item, commissioners may direct the communications team to prioritize that item. But, and, you know, Sean, I pull you back in, and I also want to pull you back in, Sean, in the spirit of the executive director, whether you or somebody else 5 years from now who's reading this document, right? Because I know that, you know, we get a little bit flustered in this process. So we got to think about operationally, how does this really work? So, you know, we have our meeting, let's say, you know, we just had a meeting. There was 3 items that were, you know, pretty simple to kind of put out there. And I think people knew where folks were going to land on that stuff. something like that, okay, gets out quickly. Something else doesn't get out as quickly. I'm just curious about, again, I don't know the operational and the behind the scenes of the processes. I know when we voted on SCP and social consumption, we wrote letters, you guys sent them to us, we read them, it took a little while. So some things take a little while to look at, to read. I don't know what the example that we use, what the process was, but can you kind of talk to us a little bit about this, Sean, in terms of this one? Like, upon approval of an item, commissioners may direct the communications team to prioritize an item. Like, is that actually, like, how would that work operationally with our teams, with our comms team, or anybody else that has to be involved with this stuff? Because we're basically saying to them, like, drop everything and do this, and do it quickly, whether it's a letter, whether we have to edit it, and that's fine. We want people to do things quickly, but like, let's also be realistic. How does this work, Sean, in your head, or in not in your head, but operationally?
I'm not entirely sure, because I think item is pretty broad, so I'm not sure what could rise to the level of being an item. So I guess I wouldn't want to assume that this is, though, all of things necessarily legislative and executive branch outreach. That's the separate section too. So an item could be anything that is on a commission agenda. And so there, I think part of that discussion at the commission meeting could be, and it should be, frankly, is, okay, what does the outreach look like for this? What message do we want to send upon approval, if there is approval? So I guess that I'm not trying, I don't want to kind of ramble too much, but I think not everything is going to require necessarily a communications plan or strategy. A number of things could, but also I don't want to, again, generalize this or specify this to be just isolated to those policy things too. But anything could be an item on the commission's agenda. It could be an enforcement action. It could be regulations. Those things are not legislative outreach per se. They are policy though. But that could be folded into your deliberations as well as what steps do we expect to take from here. So
I'm sorry to interject. I that idea resonates with me a little bit. What if we have more than, first of all, what if we have more than 5 or 6 items? Not that that happens all the time, but we're voting on 5 or 6 items. They vary from a policy position to an extension of telehealth, any number of those things. I think it would be helpful for us to have the opportunity to engage and give some direction as to what might be a priority, and do it in the course of the open meeting. If that's what I heard you saying, Sean.
yeah, that's exactly what I was referring to.
In some ways, that gets to Chair O'Brien's point of, in the open meeting, being able to have a conversation about the communications strategy, but it links it to a specific item rather than generally. And that may be more comfortable for a lot of reasons.
And I would encourage, again, inviting our communications team to engage with us at that meeting, and they may have some thoughts already about what a good, a proper approach might be, and we could have that conversation with them in an open public meeting. But giving them some direction as a body of 5, or giving them some direction kind of with the chair's leadership. Again, these are things that we're taking action on immediately. There's certainly going to be media interest based on some of our votes. There's going to be things that involve a little bit longer lead time, like appropriate letters to the legislature or whatever it might be. But
Right. It sounds like people are comfortable with that for now. Again, we're going to have a meeting with the the direct reports, so we'll get some feedback and be able to ask more or discuss how to operationalize that as well. So I want to go back to it. It seemed like number 2 was satisfactory to people.
Yep.
Any questions on number 2? Okay, how about,
Oh.
Yep.
Okay, never mind, sorry.
But oh, okay, so, no,
They took off public facing, but they moved public facing down.
You and I had the same, you and I were looking at the same thing.
Okay, so I'm
Never
gonna
mind.
assume that that's good. Okay, how about number 3? That's a minor change. Maybe not so minor.
What does that mean in a manner that balances commissioner and agency best interest? How is that defined?
I don't know.
Sean, do you know where this came from with that? I mean,
No, and I think to try to anticipate that question moving forward, I'm kind of reacting to these live with you guys as well. So I may not have pure insight into some of these. I think I could spitball agency best interest, but one of the things that I would worry about is kind of who governs that.
it's exactly my reaction.
Who's kind of the arbiter of what is an agency best interest?
Right. And that's been an issue. So
For sure. Yeah.
Is that a proposal to just remove this phrase? This is a suggestion, so it's,
see, I'd remove it, but I think that this sort of comes back to, you know, how Sean interprets this in terms of his management of the comms team. And so I'd rather leave it up to Sean to
What about
implement this, because I fear putting that in then says someone other than the commissioners, other than the executive director, gets to determine what the agency's best interests are. And I think that the agency's best interests are determined by the commission, ERS, or the executive director, and nobody else.
I think if I read this, and I don't know, because I didn't write it, it was just something that was provided to me as a comment, and so I included it, is this gets to work with individual commissioners. And so there's likely to be a tension at some points where an individual commissioner is asking for support, but an agency priority requires the comms team's attention. So I think that's where this is getting at, because it does say work with individual commissioners related to a commissioner's work project or work interest. So I think it's getting to, when does that commissioner's work interest become a priority over the agencies?
Susan, that's how I'm reading it. I'm curious if instead of saying agency's best interest, we say something like in the manner that balances commissioners and like policy priorities or voted on policy.
I think we're going beyond policy. That's what I'm saying, is that what I'm reading here is something different, Reese.
Yep.
And again, I would put this back in the purview of the executive director, because, you know, I have been in an instance where, you know, I was seeking assistance, wasn't able to get it. And, you know, I think that this has to be determined by the executive director, that the executive director says tweet something, they tweet something. If the executive director says support a commissioner in a press opportunity, they do it. I mean, I ultimately think that this has to be managed, you know, by the executive director. And I think that then that becomes the balancing act, rather than I have determined that this is not in the best interest of the commission, so I'm not going to assist you.
I mean, I've been there too, Shannon, in the sense of, you know, I've needed assistance and I haven't, there was no capacity for it. So I kind of did my own stuff, but.
No, and I've done my own stuff too. And
Yeah.
then it created problems later on.
Does this get to what you're saying? So in a manner that balances commissioner and agency priorities as determined by the executive director?
I'm more comfortable with that. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I'm more comfortable with that.
We just got to make sure that we are comfortable with that, because we're now delegating this authority as well to the executive director. So
We're either delegating it to comms or the executive director or both, but I'm more comfortable delegating it to the executive director than I am to the leadership.
Yeah,
Sean, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, if commissioners are comfortable with it, I think that's fair. I think that Commissioner Stebbins, you might have made this point as far as the referee aspect of it earlier. And I don't want to overcomplicate it or perhaps even oversimplify it, but thinking out loud, and obviously not really, I may not articulate it very clearly, but one of the things my takeaway here is this preserves, as it appropriately should, that commissioners have that individual right to work on both projects and pursue interests. Perhaps it's a second sentence here that just says, in doing so, commissioners agree to remain mindful of agency priorities as well, or something to that effect. It just basically restates that, yes, you work as individuals and you have that right, but you're also part of a team. And the request is that, and maybe it's the statement that is, we are mindful and respectful of that as well. And so it kind of cements that collaborative spirit, but also preserves that independence. And again, I may not be articulating it clearly, but that's one of my takeaways here, is that you have individual rights and interests, and respecting that is paramount. At the same time, we're an agency with a common theme and message too.
And Sean, this is one of the things I can't remember if I talked to you about this. Bruce was kind enough to take me to meet with the chair of the gaming commission.
Yeah.
But given the statutory language about the chair, quote, being responsible for the administration of the commission, this is also where I think that the chair needs to be working with the executive director, one, to help manage the individual. First of all, the chair should be delegating the work of the commission. That's in statute. And so I think that this is also something that, working with the executive director, that those priorities of individual, I should be the champion for the commissioners to be able to have both internally focused but also externally focused priorities. And that I should be, in essence, I don't know if it's negotiating, but working with Sean to make sure that one, we're balancing the needs for these, maybe not necessarily directly on point, but maybe some external things that people want to work on, whether or not there are resources that are utilized. So maybe that's I think it's someplace else in the document, but to me, it's that balance, is how we champion what people want to do that may be outside the realm of the business at hand that day, and some of the longer term policy issues that individual commissioners want to work on.
So Chair O'Brien, I know there's a section in that refers to the work of commissioners. I'm curious if you want to take the time for you and the executive director to determine what's a priority for the agency relative to, in other words, do you want it to say executive director and the chair in this section, or is your comment related to an earlier section?
I think it needs to overlap with that, because if that is in the statute and that is what we're going to at least try to capture here, one, so that we're making sure that people aren't sort of going around Sean or going around and getting resources without sort of a centralized understanding of, yes, we have the staff for that. No, we don't have the staff for that. That I don't know exactly how that's posited, but it can either be here or it can be in that other section, or it can be in both.
Commissioner Stebbins?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Just looking at the language, I'm wondering if we can parse this out a little bit. I'm looking at the language as say commissioners work projects. I hear that term, I think of a working group, which communications team might already be invited to be a part of. but I think listening to the chair, it's more about the immediate nature of a inquiry or a request for comment or something like that, more immediate press or communications related activity. Because I think we have a built-in progress around working groups that might help us scrub some of that commissioner's work projects, sweep that into someplace else. But I want to make sure I'm also hearing the chair correctly, and that we're thinking more about those immediate inquiries, requests for comment, more immediate commission communication requests than something related to something which I can see falling into a approved working group activity.
But also, Bruce, I think it has to do sort of outside of it may or may not be the immediacy, but it's if it's not a working group, but you still want to put your stamp, make your mark, work on it. It's how is that, how are those communications resources, staff resources, because in terms of balancing the agency priorities, you may want to be doing something, but we've got other priorities. For instance, we've got we're doing the regulatory rewrite. There are some things that, it's my understanding that there are requests for staff, and I'd like to do this, and I'd like to, do that, and I'd like some staff support for that. I want to make sure that we're not, harming your effort, freezing your effort to be able to do what you want to do, but making sure that we're coordinating with Sean and the comms team and any other needed staff that might support you, that it's how we're establishing what that priority is. Mm-hmm. Because if we have unlimited time and money and people, you can go off and, I'm going to run a frog painting contest with cannabis symbols. I don't know, but that may not be a priority, but it might be your priority. Again, what's the thing? Oh, horse cannabis. So.
All right, I will craft a sentence to get to Sean's point. I just can't do that online.
Can I add a statement here, a comment?
Yes.
So I'm reading this to encompass a few different things. There's working groups and then work interests, which, I talk about expungement, sealing, criminal law, things like that. But I'm wondering, and I'll give an example, and I might be off, but I'm just trying to think about this in real time. WBZ, this just ran. They did a feature on me for Black History Month because I'm the first Black commissioner. They wanted to, do a spotlight. Would that fall under this, where there's a request for that, and then it would have to then go through, our executive director of the comms team, and then the chair to figure out if we have the capacity to have that sort of media?
I think it's either or. I think that you want to be able to act quickly. Again, I'm happy with the executive director, balancing that. But to me, no, this is not opinion. It's something that gets done. And it's something that, if someone has a question, then they can bring it to the executive director and say, not really a priority, but, the commissioner is asking us to do this. But I don't think that something like that precludes you from doing something quick, getting some support. I don't see that. And I don't think that should be discouraged at all. You've been highlighted, Kim's been highlighted, Nerissa has been highlighted. I'm assuming Bruce has been highlighted someplace, and I think that continues. To me, that's the mechanics of getting that done. But I think that it's as much the sort of bigger picture kind of stuff that I want to make sure that if it's anything longer term or anything with greater resources, that what is an agency priority is balanced. But I think a quick press hit, that's easy.
So I hear you focusing, Chair O'Brien, on the work projects and our work interests, which sounds like that differentiates from Commissioner Concepcion's question. Does that make sense, Commissioner Concepcion? Does that answer that, or do you still have some discomfort with this?
I'm just not completely clear. So what is an example? Like, you guys know me now. Like every time I get in here, it's like, what's the example? So what is something that is an interest? Like, I just don't, I'm having a hard time of conceptualizing this.
I think Commissioner Stebbins and then Commissioner Camargo.
Yeah, and I'm hearing what Commissioner Concepcion is saying. I'm wondering if we don't start this section off a little bit differently. An individual commissioner shall work with the communications team and the executive director to respond to particular, flipping the scale a little bit to having the responsibility, the onus, or the opportunity with us. And our obligation to pull in the communications team and the executive director. I know this is kind of under the press and media and hopefully external engagement, but this is, I want to give us a little bit more of the lead, I think, to the chair's point, and put the obligation on us to talk to the comms team and the executive director if we have something that comes to mind.
Yeah, Bruce, I feel like that's what we do now. I feel like that's the untold or unwritten rule now.
Right.
Like,
so why not kind of memorialize that and put the onus on us, where right now I think the onus, the way it's written, the onus is a little bit more on the communications.
Yeah.
If Commissioner Concepcion, if I can, it's to me, it's, hey guys, I'm getting this great opportunity on BZ Radio. I'd like the comms team to help. The comms team says, no, we have other priorities. That's not a direct responsibility of the commission. That's nice for you, yay, but we don't have time to do that. So you're going to have to. So I think that, to me, this is where, in essence, the executive director gets to make that determination. Yes, you support the commissioner, or no, the commissioner doesn't get those resources. But I think that we should be able to go to the press team. We should be able to work, quickly, efficiently, and collaboratively with them. But to me, it's the question of, in balancing agency priorities, I think that has to be the executive director's role.
Commissioner Camargo?
Yeah, I was going to say, Chair, no, I think we all agree in terms of like the media hits. I think everyone here probably may not have too much complaints about the media hits and things like that. I think that kind of moves along. But what I'm stuck in right now is that when we say priorities, I feel like in my head, I hear what we've voted on, or what we've voted on that we're trying to get. So, we talked about the SCP fund, we talked about social consumption, the recent stuff that we just voted on, the curriculum, like that is all now policy. To me, those are the priorities. So I think at some point, and I would say again, Susan, bring this back to the communications team, because I feel like we're going around in circles. I'm curious to see how they see this and how they picture it. But I think that there's two different things here. There's like media inquiries, events, things like that. And then there's like priorities that we've all voted on, whether we've voted on it or not, it's a priority. Commissioner Concepcion, you talked earlier about expungement. We know that that's one of your priorities. I think all of us, out of respect for each other, know that that's one of your priorities. And, I think that if somebody said, oh, we're working on something for Concepcion on this, so hey, Nerys, you have to wait, another week to work on yours. Like, I understand that that's your priority, and vice versa, and some of us may not feel like that. But I think, all that being said, I feel like there's individual priorities that we're working on, and sometimes we know about them, sometimes we don't. So I think it's good to keep having more conversation. And then I think there's priorities that we've already voted on as a commission that are the key things that I think we're talking about here. So that's just my quick thought.
Commissioner Concepcion?
Thank you. I feel like we're going around in circles over and over and over again. And Chair, you made a comment that about the executive director and his role and him being sort of that determining person. And that happens. That's currently the process that we have. So now I'm starting to get a little bit worried about going into the weeds of something and then dissecting something that's already happening. I guess I'm because usually, and Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that, if there's a request by or for communications from a commissioner, you're notified and you know about that. And there's a kind of a conversation and determination about how to proceed and what needs to be prioritized.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to, I think I hear what everyone's saying. I'm gonna rewrite this and also highlight it so we talk about it with the comms team at the next meeting.
I'm sorry, Susan. I also just wanted to hear from Sean as well, just to make sure that my
Okay.
understanding is
Sorry.
accurate.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. And yes and no, not always as far as the notification to me, but I don't know that I'd want to micromanage to that extent. If the commissioner is satisfied, I don't know that I mean, I may eventually learn about it, but it wouldn't be with you have my blessing to proceed. Obviously, I think this speaks to the point Commissioner Stebbins made a while back. If there's a disagreement, I would obviously be brought in that instance to try to reconcile between the two. But if it's all systems go, the only thing that I've asked communications to do is make sure that all commissioners are aware.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna keep going on this. That's all we have from communications. Okay. Let's see, is it worth?
Yay!
Yeah. Let's take a quick look at accountability. We only have about 10 minutes because I need a few minutes to talk about next steps. Professional development. So there was a suggestion to name this professional development and ethics training obligations because it just highlights that. So question about that. And then the other item on this one is to remove number 3 because the practice is that commissioners' training and development budgets are part of the overall agency's budget. So first off, should we include ethics training obligations in the title? Anyone have a problem with that?
Are we obligated to do that someplace else in the document?
I don't think so. I think it just says, well, there are two things. One, it says that you're obligated to work in accordance with them. And then in the secretary piece, there's something that says the secretary will initiate those trainings.
I don't think the intent was to have that here. And
Okay.
I think the new language for the secretary makes it clear that the Commissioner Roy will keep us all on task to make sure we do our ethics training. I don't consider that necessarily professional development. And I know we've added the title on, but we have other training obligations that we should be required to have. I think leaving professional development kind of standalone is a much better approach.
Everyone agree with that? Anyone disagree?
No.
Okay. And what about removing number 3?
I don't see any need to remove it. I think it makes sure that we're backing up what we do by making sure that there are allocations for professional development for commissioners in the budget.
Does this suggest a separate line item for that? I think that was the concern.
Sean, where would this fall in our existing budget?
All professional development across the agency falls under an HR allotment. So there is no specific, this is professional development for legal, this is professional development for investigators. It's all under one agency-wide kind of pool or pot. So commissioners would have access to that HR pool, just as any other employee would.
So let me wordsmith it a little bit and just say the annual commission budget will include allocations for professional development to include or to be accessed by commissioners, executive director, and all commission staff. I think that's it's more of a statement than it is necessarily a functional number 3. I think it's more of a policy statement of our own. But we think it's important, and we're going to allocate money for it, and everybody has access to use it, subject to the executive director's decision.
Does that work for everyone? Okay. See that? All right, conflict resolution is new. We probably don't have time to do that. Let's hold off on that for the next meeting. Commissioner Stebbins, there was a lot of change to the secretary roles and responsibilities. Sorry for the quick movement. The commission secretary. So there was.
Susan, we got rid of Commissioner Stebbins and we got a new and improved Commissioner Roy.
And I noticed under her leadership, there's now a wardrobe budget for the secretary. That's awesome.
Whoa. I'm the guy that needed it.
All right, is that switched already? Oh, because it was January. Got it. Okay. So Commissioner Roy, did you have a chance to look at this section before we met?
Yeah, let's just go through it as a group.
Okay. All right. So here at the top, it just took that B and put it into, it put it down further. So that's not a change. Here, this try. So currently the review is on a biannual basis. And the general counsel suggested that they are hoping to go to a triannual basis. I don't know what the status of that is, if we should put try or leave it as bi, since that's the current policy.
I think, I'm sorry, it's the former secretary, I can weigh in. We've actually adopted a policy of reviewing it on a tri-annual basis.
Okay, so we'll use that.
Could you go back up to the first bullet, number 1?
Can I ask a question just about that one bullet point we changed about the biannual, triannual? Is that something that we want to set in stone here, or do we want to sort of have some sort of level of flexibility there?
I think that follows, I don't want to say it's state law, but it's certainly recommendations out of the Attorney General's office. But I hear your point. That would probably flip if they ever changed it again. So maybe we reference who that recommendation came from. Sean, it follows the Attorney General's office recommendation, I think?
It does, yeah. So they issue periodic guidance as to quote best practice. But there was also a decision, I want to say it was Oak Bluffs, where the practice maybe of a Board of Selectmen or something was reviewed by the AG's office, and that's where the triannual recommendation originated, was in that decision. So we've leveraged that to adopt it. But I think Commissioner Concepcion, your point is well taken. Does this lock us in to something that might be a moving target in the future as well? So
Should we add a footnote and just say, in accordance with policy guidance by the Attorney General's office?
Yes.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Roy, were you
Well,
okay?
I just
Yeah.
wanted to kind of talk that one out loud. So in meeting with our legal team, they said that there will be like more of an influx of public session meetings, because not only these mediation sessions, but also going into regs with public hearings. So is public session minutes that encompasses public meeting and public hearing. I just want to make sure that it does, and then in a timely manner. So what does that mean? Because at one point, legal had said there could be a backlog because the minutes are going to start to stack up. So there could be a backlog. So I don't know. I'm just kind of talking out loud. Prepare the public session minutes in a timely manner for approval at public meeting of the commissioners. I don't know. I mean, does that cover?
Just notice that it starts with coordinates with the general counsel and legal staff. So it's not all on you. You're working with them.
Right. Okay.
What are you more comfortable with, Madam Secretary? What is it? Are you saying that you want it to be faster, or?
No, I'm saying I don't want there to be an unrealistic expectation of minutes approval if we've had. Now we're talking about adding another public meeting, right? So if we have 2 public meetings a month, we have mediation, I mean, there'll be like exponentially could be a lot more minutes. So I just want to run it by my fellow commissioners that what is a timely manner, and obviously we want to get them done expeditiously, but I guess it's fine. I just want to put it on everybody's radar, like there will be a lot more minutes to approve.
I think you're in a safe space with that language. I would fully expect, if you wanted to give us, or the legal team wanted to say, these are the minutes we have in the queue, we're working on them, I don't think any of us would be surprised by, this is only a 3-hour session, and obviously there are considerable minutes that are going to need to be written for this. So I think in a timely manner gives the secretary your authority with the legal staff to say, look at our workload, look at what we're producing, and hopefully 4 of us would appreciate that.
Yep. Okay.
As opposed to holding everybody to a certain time frame, which would exhaust our legal staff.
Because at one point there was a backlog of minutes, I was told, right?
Yep.
You came on board. What happened? There was like a backlog of minutes.
Yeah, I'm not sure why there was a backlog, but I know we had to play catch up and kind of catch up on all those math. And actually that translated, I think, into a performance measurement for someone on the legal team to make sure that they were producing minutes in
okay.
certain amount of time.
Okay.
Okay, I'm moving to Romanet 3. This was all clarified by the general counsel. We had asked her to do that at the direct reports meeting. I don't know if you have questions about that. Same with Romanet 4. Any questions about Romanet 3, 4, or 5?
Look to Bruce and Kim if there's
I just had a meeting last week with legal around this.
Okay, great.
Yeah, they look fine.
Okay, and then C. Just added the word legislatively required.
I actually have a question for Commissioner Stebbins. Did you have a role in the e-discovery? Did you look at were you privy to e-discovery reports or anything around e-discovery? And should this be in here?
I did not.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. So just next steps. So we've got a meeting on March 23rd with the direct reports. What I'm gonna do based on this meeting is revise the draft and distribute it this afternoon to the direct reports, so they have a chance, to the department heads, so they have a chance to review it. I've got meetings with the comms team and the COO team scheduled. I'm still waiting to schedule the one with the investigations. But then I will bring back on March 23rd a draft that includes additional feedback from the department heads, and we'll review that with the direct reports. So by the end of the meeting, yep, Bruce?
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you want us to have an opportunity to weigh in on the new conflict resolution section before it gets redistributed?
I think that would be nice, but I'm not sure that there's time because they need some time to read it. I will just indicate that this is new and not reviewed. And so we can look at it all together for the first time at the next meeting. So what else did I want to say? So again, we're meeting on the 23rd, and then we have our meeting on March 1st, which will just be all of us without any others, and we'll try and get through it. I think I may ask Grace to schedule a second meeting so we've got that in case we need it, because we're trying to finalize it, and the issues do take a bit longer than we may have in one day. Other thing is, at our meeting on February 23rd, we're in Worcester, and we do not have staff support for lunch. So I just want to be clear that we're on our own for lunch. If somebody wants to organize, they may, but can't do it with an expectation.
I'll take care of it.
But you would then have to order it and have it picked up, and they're not available to do all that. Do you think you are?
So Chair, I'll help you with that. I'll help you with all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll figure this out.
Okay. All right. Thank
When
you.
we say there's no staff support, is nobody in the, I'm like, so I was thinking like ordering and paying. I'm happy to do that, but.
Yeah, Madam Chair, we'll figure this out. I will.
Okay.
Thank you for the, thank you, Susan. I was not aware of that, so thank you.
Okay. All right.
Looks like Mike Baker has his little tiny hand up there.
Does someone have a hand up?
I don't think I meant to have a hand up.
Is that just a general, hey, guys, my left hand is still
Yes.
working?
Okay. Yeah.
I hope you didn't forget about me. That's the hand. If there was.
Okay, and then last thing is Chair O'Brien and I are going to walk through the charter together to just kind of make sure things are polished, and just want to give all of you an opportunity to do that if you want to just meet with me separately to walk through any questions or comments that you have. So if you do want to do that, please send me an email and we'll schedule a time to make sure that can happen. And that's everything from my end. Any questions or comments or directions?
Susan, do you feel like we're still on track for
I think we're still on track. Yeah, I think we're still on track. I think we have a tight time frame. I hope that we can meet it. We may need another meeting than is currently planned. But, you know, again, I think the drive right now is to get it finished so that I'm available for the implementation. So that as questions of operationalizing the charter come through, there's an easy way to just, rather than get frustrated, then is to just, we'll figure out the the way to do it, but something like send me an email and say, this didn't happen the way I thought it was, and then work to try and clarify it so that I think we need to be clear that this isn't going to be operationalized in one fell swoop, and it's words on a page and people will likely interpret them differently. So we're going to need to make sure everyone has margins to either make mistakes or just have different interpretations, as all of you try to create a new or improve the culture at the organization. So the goal to finish it is to make sure that there's time for me to help with that.
You know, one thing that I think is going to be important, and we spent a lot of time on this, but messaging, communications, everyone's wondering, maybe it hasn't been picked up by the media on what we're doing in governance. But if we're going to talk about this at public meeting, you know, how are we going to talk about this, right, Sean? And the chair, I don't know who's leading the conversation or when it gets on the agenda, but you know, what's that message? What are we going to talk about? What does this mean? And kind of, you know, we joke around about the ceremony of the new secretary, but like, you know, this marks a big point in the commission. And I think for all of us as well as commissioners. So, you know, I would encourage all of us to think about what that looks like. And then, you know, okay, ready, set, go. You know, now I got a governance document that I'm going to hit Sean over the head when I see him with it, if he doesn't do, you know, or I'm just kidding, Sean, you know, or myself, right? But like, what does this really mean? How are we going to implement this? So I just want people to think about that, because it sounds all great and we've done so much work to get here, but like, how do we really now play within the handbook, you know, or within the governance document to be able to do that? But then also, most importantly, is how are we communicating this, or how are we this is like a marriage, how are we marrying you know, our leadership and our direct reports and everybody else to this document? So, you know, what I've learned at this agency is that everybody's very engaged. So we just have to think about how we're presenting this whole thing to people and how we are engaging everybody in the implementation process. So
and one of the, I agree with that. And one of the things I'd said to Susan is, you know, I feel like we're sort of clarifying what commissioners can and cannot do, and, you know, how, not cannot, but how we moderate our behavior. You know, one of the questions that I have is, you know, and I'd sort of throw at the commissioners, not to answer now, but to be thinking about is, you know, is there any language that we need to be putting in there that puts the staff on notice as to what is expected of them? And, you know, I don't know if that's necessary, but, you know, I wanted just folks to think about that, because sometimes, you know, Sean gets hit over the head with the piece of paper, but, you know, he's given the direction, and sometimes that direction isn't followed. And so I want to make sure that we are supporting Sean and his ability, and the messaging to the team has to be, we, you know, argue, make your point, do whatever you have to do, but there's one ultimate decision maker, and that's the executive director. And I don't think that culturally is where we are right now. And I think it's something that we have to constantly remind the team that that's where we are as a commission, that we support Sean, and he's the decider. So
Susan, do you have recommendations on that, on I guess my comments a little bit in terms of like implementation, knowing what you know from the commission, especially where we're at right now, temperature wise?
Oh, I want to think about that more. I think those are really good points. I certainly think the messaging is important when this comes to a public vote. I think how it gets introduced and discussed is really important. Yeah, so I want to think about that more. Commissioner,
Yeah, it'll be good. Yeah, it'll be good to hear from you on that.
Yeah, I think all of us have heard from different sources that there's some toxicity, right? There's things are toxic, and I guess we need to ask ourselves, what is this? Does this document at the end of the day make us more toxic or less toxic? And if we're trying to make this environment less toxic, are we accomplishing that with this document? So I think we all need to, why are we toxic? Number one. And number two, how do we become less toxic? And number three, does this document do that? So.
Yeah, I think those are really good points.
I agree. Thank you, Kim.
And really has a lot to do with how you all speak to it before the vote.
Just making sure that we're not speaking to people about this until we sort of have that consensus. I know we take notes and we have but I think that it's important to kind of keep this on the inside and make sure that is sort of rigorously followed.
I hope we have. That's been the rule since the beginning. So I hope we have.
All right, it's 12 o'clock. We did a lot of good work, got through all of the key issues except for the conflict resolution, but that we'll get to that. And shouldn't be controversial. It's just the best way to do it. It's just what will be the best way to do it. So thank you very much. I know people don't necessarily love the virtual platform, but I think it was the best we could do this time around. And I will look very much forward to seeing you all on Thursday.
Thank you.
You need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, yes, sorry. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Roy.
So moved.
Commissioner Camargo, will you second that?
Second.
We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Camargo.
Yes, please. Aye.
Commissioner Concepcion.
Aye.
Commissioner Roy.
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, 5-0 to adjourn. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Susan. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.